Hey everybody, Jim LeDuc here, and this is my follow-up finally to the case study of Billy, which applies the 6 major strategies or approaches to psychology to a specific situation, in this case, Billy, where we're going to take a look at his behavior, some of his issues, and how to correct some of those issues based on each of the 6 approaches. All right. So let's review then. If you followed the last time I did the old presentation on the 6 approaches in depth, I left you with a handout on Billy. And so let's take a look at Billy's situation here. And you can see that I have a few little marks, little side notes on in the margin that I'll refer to. So Billy was the 3rd child of loving but busy parents. When he was growing up, he thought that his parents favored his older siblings. When Billy was 4, his parents divorced and he remained with his father. His brother and sister moved with his mother to a distant city. Billy rarely saw them. So here up in the margin, I said unresolved childhood issues. We'll come back to them. Feeling inadequate in raising his son alone, Billy's father responded by providing the child with costly toys and frequent trips to amusement parks. So I put over in the margin, there's a behaviorism problem here where Billy is getting unconditional rewards from his father, really based upon his father's guilt for not being there more for him, which is not really, his rewards aren't really based on anything except for his guilt. So that's not a good thing. All right, let's keep going. As Billy grew older and attended school, he had trouble focusing and was taken to a doctor for an appraisal of his abilities and disabilities. Billy's medical evaluation showed symptoms of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD. But Billy's dad ignored the medical evaluation diagnosis. So over the margin, I put neurological disorder, chemical imbalance. Also, crazy dad, that dad would say, oh, my son's not mentally sick. I'm not going to give him any pills. Well, dad, you know, sometimes when there's a medical disorder and you can fix them with prescribed drugs under the care of a good, competent doctor or psychiatrist, then you should consider it for the happiness and well-being of your son who's going through some serious problems. Let's keep going. Because of these difficulties in school, Billy had trouble making friends and was ridiculed by his classmates. No one likes to be made fun of in school, probably in high school. By the time Billy was an adolescent, he had difficulty forming lasting relationships, despite his expertise in sports, in athletics. So I put over here, and the margin, sports is a positive reward system. There's a potential for school achievement, but he needs acceptance. Okay, that's in the next part. He was capable of high academic achievement, but his grades were below average. Teacher reports frequently cited his excessive need for attention. Personally, he felt lost and doomed to failure. Billy's got a lot of issues going on here. Well, let's take a look at them from each of the 6 approaches or strategies and see if we can come up with some help for the poor guy. All right. Let me move my picture over a little bit. Okay. Now, we're going to take a look at it first from a psychological or psychoanalytic, psychodynamic perspective. And here's the major points on psychoanalytic. The psychologists of the psychoanalytic approach believe that a person's behavior is determined by primal drives and the experiences of early childhood. Okay, experiences of early childhood, very important. This school of psychology emphasizes the unconscious mind. Now, I'll talk to you more about that in just a second. Some psychoanalytic theorists focus on the relevance of feelings of inferiority, which we know that Billy has, while others stress the resolution of psychosocial or psychosexual conflicts. Now, we're going to talk some more about this. In fact, I'll give you a little background on this right now. Okay, so obviously, from his experiences in early childhood, Billy might believe that, well, you know what? His parents got divorced. It was his fault because his mom and siblings moved away and he hardly ever sees them. Why wouldn't he think that? Then he's with his dad who doesn't spend any time with him. So he could feel abandoned, and as a young child, he could probably think that maybe the divorce was his fault. Additionally, when we talk about Freud, he had some interesting concepts. Now, remember, Freud was 150 years ago. And we know that most of Freud's theories have been proven false. In fact, you really couldn't test Freud's stuff. It was before computers. He could come up with a hypothesis, but really all he could do was look at early experiences going inside the black box of the human mind, and then the output was behavior or abnormal behavior. So there wasn't any really scientific approach at the time. There was no modern medicine. There was no way to look inside the brain to see brain activity. They didn't really know much about hormonal stuff or neurochemicals, neurotransmitters. And so Freud would look at his past. Now, Freud had some very traditional at the time theories on what he talked about as psychosexual dysfunction. And I'll touch on that just briefly because Freud gets into some kind of weird stuff. So Freud talked about the unconscious mind, like he had the id, ego, superego, where basically someone has the devil on their shoulder telling them to do evil things, and then the angel on their shoulder telling them to do good things, and then the mediator, which is the consciousness trying to determine what was right and what's wrong to do, this internal battle all the time. It's kind of like where the devil made me do it came from. But let's get into the psychosexual development. Freud believed, ironically, interestingly enough, that boys get their gender identity from, what it starts with kind of what he called the Oedipus complex. Now, if you know anything about Oedipus, in Greek mythology, Oedipus was in love with his mother, but at the time he didn't know she was his mother. He was grown up. And because he was in love with his mother, he was jealous of his father, who he didn't know were his parents at the time. He had his father killed in the battlefront, called him to the front of the battle, and he was killed. Then he married his mom. Then he had intimate relations with his mom. And then he found out she was his mom. And he told her, and she hung herself, and he gouged his eyes out. And they all lived not very happily ever after. But here's the deal. Freud thought that little boys had kind of this sexual attraction for their moms, and little girls had this sexual attraction toward their dads. So when a little girl says, when I grow up, I want to marry my dad, my daughter would say, I thought it was really cute. What Freud thought was, that little girl's got feelings for her dad. It's just kind of creepy. But getting back to it, because a little boy is jealous of their same-sex parent, and they want attention, and they're competing for attention of their opposite-sex parent, they imitate the behavior of their same-sex parent. And in doing so, they can better compete for the affection of the opposite-sex parent, and they learn their gender identity in this way. Now, I know it's weird and it's a little creepy. And we also know from modern medicine and research and kind of common sense nowadays that gender identity is so much more complex than this, and that this theory is false, and there's no truth to it. In fact, one recent research was done about boys who are raised in an environment with a single mom without a dad. And the theory was, remember, psychology is theory-based. You come up with a hypothesis, you test it, you measure the results, and you have your findings. The theory was that boys who were raised without a dad were more likely to be gay. The research found that this is not true. That whether or not you have both your parents or one parent or the other has no bearing on gender identity. And you and I both know that it's much more complex than that. And beside that, and I don't want you guys to think anything about me or that I'm making judgment or anything. whatever you guys like, whatever fits you, whatever makes you happy as far as relationships are concerned. That's what I want for you. We don't want ignorance out there, and we don't want people misjudging people based on ignorance or false theories, do we? So whatever your lifestyle or your attractions, hey, that's your business. I'm just here to teach about psychology, and I just want you to be happy. Okay, so let's move on. So again, let's go to kind of the analysis and approach for this. So and how to solve some of his issues. So the major source of Billy's behavioral problems based on psychodynamics or psychoanalytics stem from his unresolved issues from early childhood, which could make him believe that the divorce was his fault, like I said, or that he wasn't good enough for his mother and his siblings did not like to associate with him. Okay. He may have developed some unresolved conflicts in his unconscious mind relating to impulsiveness or self-control and behaving inappropriately as a way of getting attention. And he could have developed some confusion in his gender identity as his mother seemed to abandon him and his father is not very involved in Billy's school or sports, which could make him feel confused about proper gender roles and social gender behavioral expectations. A little bit old-fashioned, a little bit traditional, a little bit Freudian, okay? So the help then, based on psychoanalysis, would be to help him reconnect with his mom and siblings. By the way, psychoanalysis requires lots of therapy sessions, 2 or 3 a week for 6 months. You have to establish trust with the therapist. That's the most important thing, and that takes time. And insurance companies don't like that. So usually psychoanalysis is used, but it's used with other types of therapy strategies, okay? Family counseling would be helpful that he could understand and counsel with his mom and siblings and his dad, by Zoom or something, whatever, that the real reasons why his mom left to the siblings. Maybe it was money, maybe it was other issues, but certainly it was not Billy's fault. He was just a little boy. Maybe set up some peer counseling at school to help Billy understand how to properly socially interact, how to make friends, and have dad be more involved in school and go watch Billy's athletics and his sporting events and get the other family members involved in his sporting events. And then maybe lastly, Billy might be able to get a counselor at school or a coach or a teacher, become a mentor for Billy in teaching him about socially acceptable behavior. All right, let's move on to the next one. The next one is the behaviorist approach. And in the behaviorist approach, behaviorists stress the connection between stimulus response and behavior reward. These theorists view the environment rather than the internal states as instrumental in behavior. So in the historical timeline of psychology, psychoanalysis came first of modern psychology, followed by behaviorism. Behaviorism totally disagreed with psychoanalysis, okay? According to behaviorists, a person's behavior is determined by the actions that were rewarded or punished. Reinforcement, positive and negative. Through this process, the person learns to associate certain acts with the response it produces. So this is about, it's as simple as, let's say you wear a new shirt to school and your friends all go, wow, that is the coolest shirt. I want to get one too. Where'd you get it? I love it. You're more likely to wear it because you get positive feedback. If you wear a shirt that's hideous, you love it, but everyone else at school says, man, that is the ugliest shirt I've ever seen. I can't believe you're wearing that. You need to burn it. You probably wouldn't wear it to school again. Okay, that's positive and negative reinforcement. If you get positive rewards or reinforcement, you're more likely to repeat a behavior. If you get negative reinforcement, then you're less likely to repeat the behavior. And then there's observational learning. There's also a series of rewards and punishment. So just keeping the history real simple, because I already covered it. Remember, Pavlov's dogs. So Pavlov's dogs, in fact, Pavlov got a Nobel Prize studying digestion of animals, of dogs. And so he set up this experiment where he would ring a bell, then he would immediately serve food to the dogs, and the dogs would salivate when they saw the food. Over a period of time, he'd ring a bell. If he did it consistently, he'd ring the bell, bring the food, the dogs would salivate. Over a period of time, all he had to do was ring the bell and the dogs would salivate, even without the food there. That's called a conditioned response. Billy could have a conditioned response with school, like goes to school, has a humiliating experience, he gets sick, or he gets discouraged, or he gets angry. Well, now he associates going to school or school with anger or anxiety or depression, right? Or different reward systems, or he could also, well, observational learning could kind of help, but that's the major thing. Remember that there was a guy by the name of John Watson, and he trained this little boy, little Albert, to be afraid of white furry things. Because whenever little Albert reached for a white furry rabbit or a white furry rat, Watson would make this big, loud banging noise and scare poor little Albert. And so over time, little Albert associated the loud noise with the white furry animal, and little Albert was afraid when he saw the animal, a conditioned response. And then you had B.F. Skinner, and he had his Skinner box, and he could teach pigeons to do all kinds of things through reward systems, through reinforcement, positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement. Okay, so that's behaviorist approach. Now, from behaviorism standpoint, let me go back here. Sorry about that. The major source of Billy's behavioral problems stem from three areas. First, he's conditioned to associate school with poor performance and peer ridicule, like I said. This results in his insecurity at school, his lack of effort, and his desire to isolate himself from his classmates. Next, Billy's reward systems are all messed up. His dad gives him costly toys and trips to Disneyland. Why? Because of his guilt. Instead of performance in school or sports. So his reward systems are all messed up. Billy has learned that he can do whatever he wants at home and he gets a reward. He does whatever he wants at school and he gets ridiculed and made fun of. So there's inconsistency here. Instead, Billy's dad needs to set up a reward system based on Billy's accomplishments in sports and his classroom grades, obviously. Then, to encourage that behavior through his active involvement and discussion, his own personal active involvement and discussions on Billy's progress. Okay. The next one is the humanistic approach. Now, the humanistics totally disagreed with the behaviorists, and they believe that emphasize the concept that people are in control of their own destiny, that no matter what the obstacles are that you have to overcome, what kind of circumstances you're born in or you're faced with, you can overcome. You can become your ideal self, your best self. Okay. You can reach your destiny. You can reach your full potential. So also one tries to satisfy both basic and enriching needs, always striving for personal achievement. Abraham Maslow talked about this with his hierarchy of needs, which we talked about before. A person's self-concept is important. Think about Billy's self-concept. Humanists emphasize the inherent worth or internal worth or self-worth of the individual. Okay? So from a humanistic perspective, the major source of Billy's behavioral problems result from his feelings of helplessness, as he feels trapped that no matter what he does, he isn't good enough for mom's and siblings' attention and acceptance. He also feels like he is unable to make long-term relationships, and I am guessing here that he may struggle with the lack of confidence to ask girls or guys, whatever, out on a date or to have a lasting, relationship with a significant other. However, there is one area of his life where he feels success and self-esteem. course, he's good at sports, right? So perhaps a coach could get involved and help Billy maintain his eligibility and perhaps have team leadership opportunities. Maybe we could make Billy a team captain or a captain over a certain activity or something to give him some confidence and respect from the other players. Teachers could assign Billy to a classroom work group made up of some of the best students with regards to help him feel accepted and make him part of a better classroom situation and better results. I'll tell you, over the years, I loved my overachievers, man. They are what made me tick. I was so motivated to teach my overachievers because they were always participating, always listening, always respectful, always doing their work, not slackers. And so if I had someone like Billy, I'd say, oh, hey, okay, can you guys come here for a minute? Here's the deal. I know you guys are a superstar group. Would you mind including Billy in your group? Most of the time, girls, not always. I had some guys that were super overachievers too. And they'd say, sure, Mr. Leduc, no problem. We got this. We know what you want. And they would. They transform Billy into a superstar. Never fail. Love my overachievers. And maybe he might meet that special someone in one of his groups. Okay. Additionally, there are student clubs and associations that focus on confidence, trust, unity, and cooperation. Perhaps a teacher or counselor could direct him to one of those groups or clubs. Think about it. We had Renaissance, we had Big Brother, we had Unity. We had so many clubs that gave students opportunities for leadership and making social connections. So important, those social connections. Okay. Next, cognitive approach. Now, whenever you see cognitive means thinking, thought processes, and also memory, because memory is also involved in the thinking process. How our brain works. Memories are part of that. How memories are stored, recorded, stored, and retrieved from our brain. Okay. So cognitive theorists feature the mental processing of the individual. To these psychologists, a person's difficulties often stem from false perceptions of reality. Okay? Like with Billy, false perception of reality. The divorce was his fault. False perceptions of reality. Billy can't do well in school. False perceptions of reality. Billy's mom and siblings don't like him. So he's dealing with all these false perceptions of reality. Remember, perception is the way we think. Okay, the way we perceive, the way we interpret external stimuli. Cognitive theorists believe that people develop ideas of the world and base their judgments upon these perceptions. Some theorists of the school view intellectual growth as stage-related, like Jean Piaget. Jean Piaget was a child psychologist, and he studied the stages of cognitive development in children. And what he found was, and I love child psychology, I love studying how children think because they do not think like adults. And any adult that thinks a child thinks like an adult is dead wrong, especially if they're kids. They think differently. Like, for example, object permanence. Kids until about 2.5 don't realize that when an object, you can't see it, it's still there. So that's why when you play peekaboo with a young child, every time they laugh because you're gone, and then you just magically appear again. Or they can't recognize themselves in a mirror until about age 3.5. Or there's so many different thoughts, like thinking of context, like, for example, like, what do you want? 2 quarters or $1? Oh, I want 2 quarters, right? Because it's more, it's 2. Anyway, there's a bunch of different Piaget stuff that I love. Seeing the world through someone else's viewpoint. Kids don't get this till about 3 or 4. So a child would think that you could see what they're seeing on the computer screen until about 3.5 or 4. So all these things, children, and guess what? The last part of the brain to develop is our frontal lobe right here. And our frontal lobe is personality, thinking, intelligence, problem solving, emotions, a lot going on right here. And really, it still develops into early adulthood. Okay. So there you have the cognitive approach. Now, let's take a look at how we can help Billy. The major source of Billy's behavioral problems may have developed because of his false perceptions of reality. Like I told you, being a failure, family doesn't like him, father doesn't have time for him, he can't get high grades, he has no friends. These are a lot of false perceptions, right? We talked about this already. The cognitive strategy refers to a stage-related intellectual growth. This refers to a guru and a child psychologist named Jean Piaget, which I talked about. Therefore, thoughts, emotions, and problem solving are a work in progress. As we all know, children and adolescents don't think like adults. So we're going to work on some therapy, maybe some family therapy, to correct his his false perceptions, to show him what's really true, and to help him get through those incorrect thoughts that he has. All right, the next one is biological. Biological is very simple. If we have a behavioral issue, it's tied to biological or neurological, okay? Genetic, as we know, like depression, anxiety, addictions, things like that, those are all genetic. So are some mental illnesses, genetic, medical, neurological components. So hormonal changes, brain anomalies, neurochemical differences help determine a person's actions and subsequent changes in behavior. So it's very simple. Billy has a biological problem, and you remember what it is. It's ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And that's a biological problem. And how do you fix it? With medication. Not street drugs, but medication by a doctor that knows how to prescribe. And then you follow the directions. And the doctor may have to fine-tune that a little bit. But medications are a lot better than they were, and a lot more precise in dealing with specific mental issues than they were 5 years ago even, okay? The last one is the social-cultural approach. And the social-cultural approach is very simple. It examines how an individual's behavior is influenced by their social and cultural factors: family, friends, environment, religion, school. We have tons of different social influences on our behavior. I'm just going to bet that if you worship, you're religious, you probably act a little different when you're involved in your religious activities than you are when you're hanging out with your friends on a weekend. I bet. Okay. So let's look at Billy. The major sources of Billy's behavioral issues are caused by conflicts within his family and the issues within his classroom performance, his misbehavior in the classroom, and frustration with making friends. His one successful school experience is in sports. This would be a good starting point for increasing his social status with his classmates and an incentive to improve his commitment to schoolwork, maintain his eligibility. And his mom and siblings could increase their engagement in Billy's life, his school achievements, and other aspects of his social interaction. So you can correct and adjust and help Billy overcome some of his social influences that cause him to struggle, and turn them into strengths, reinforcement, encouragement, enthusiasm. Okay? Now, final thought here. You can see that these 6 approaches strategies, they're not mutually exclusive. They overrun one into another. Okay? There's some redundancy, there's some repetitiveness. Okay? They're not all mutually exclusive. In fact, there's a term called eclectic that means a combination of 2 or more different types of strategies. And that's really what would work here with Billy. We wouldn't just focus on one approach. We'd probably use a variety of approaches to best serve his needs, right? And so there's a lot of different ways of combining these things. I'll give you one example out there today that's very popular is cognitive behavioral therapy. So rethink their thinking while reconditioning their reward system, hand in hand to help a patient overcome. Cognitive behavioral. One area where that works, where it's very successful, is with phobias. Okay, like arachnophobia, fear of spiders. Well, you can rethink that cognitively as you behaviorally get hands-on with a spider and realize, it's harmless, right? Of course, you want to use a harmless spider to do that, like a tarantula that doesn't bite. So there you have it, guys. There's your review of how you apply the 6 different approaches or strategies to a case study where you have a difference of areas of influence on the behavior and areas of how to treat or improve, overcome. And that's the end of this session, part 2 of our 6 strategies to psychology through analyzing Billy as a case study. So, you should hang on to this and review it every once in a while, because it really will help you down the road if you're preparing for an AP test or using it as a scaffolding, as a building blocks as we go throughout the different concepts that we will talk about in the near future. So take care. Have a great day. Be happy. Do something nice for someone else. And I'll see you soon. Take care.